The sun was just beginning to cast its golden hue over the rolling plains of New Mexico, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples. Jaron Apache rode alone, his horse kicking up dust that danced like ghosts in the morning light. He had been away for 5 years, traveling east to study cattle trade, gunsmithing, and even the ways of lawmen and outlaws alike. But his return was not to settle peacefully. Jaron had a mission, one that simmered quietly in his mind, fueled by a mixture of pride, anger, and a longing to teach his family a lesson they would never forget. The Apache family had always been powerful, respected, and feared in equal measure. Their name carried weight, and their traditions were honored by the surrounding settlements. Yet over time, pride had turned to arrogance. They looked down on those they considered beneath them, maids, laborers, traders, and they dismissed the worth of anyone who did not carry wealth, status, or bloodlines of their own. Jaron's heart ached each time he remembered his father sneering at the struggling townsfolk, his mother whispering that love and loyalty were only for those of proper station. Jaron's plan was simple, yet bold, and required a kind of courage few could summon. He would marry a woman his family would never expect a maid. A woman ordinary, unknown, yet exceptional in ways his family could never appreciate. Through this marriage, he intended to expose the shallow arrogance of his kin and prove that worth was measured not by titles or money, but by heart, intelligence, and spirit. His gaze shifted to the small town ahead, the wooden structures rising like a patchwork of human endeavor against the endless plains. Among these buildings was a modest boarding house run by a woman named Clara Duval. At 30 years old, Clara carried herself with quiet dignity. Her hair, streaked with silver threads, was always neatly braided, her hands calloused from years of scrubbing floors, tending to fires, and mending clothes. She was unseen by the wealthy, unnoticed by men of ambition, but there was a spark in her amber eyes, a strength and kindness that shone despite the hardships of her life. Jaron rode into town under the guise of a traveler seeking work. His dark hair, braided with a single silver bead to signify his heritage, caught the sunlight. He wore a long duster coat over traditional Apache attire, a subtle reminder of where he came from, yet different enough to be seen as mysterious, almost untouchable. The townsfolk whispered as he passed. "That's Jaron Apache," one man muttered, returned from the east. But the whispers held a mix of awe and fear. No one dared approach him, and fewer still knew the reason for his return. Clara noticed him almost immediately. He walked into her boarding house, requesting a room and a meal. There was something in his posture, an easy confidence, a quiet intensity that set him apart from other travelers. When their eyes met, she felt a flicker of curiosity and caution. "You're not from around here," she said softly, though she kept her tone polite. "And you carry a weight with you, stranger." "I carry nothing that can't be left behind," Jaron replied, a small, enigmatic smile playing on his lips. "But I've come seeking something. Or perhaps someone." Clara tilted her head, sensing that beneath his calm exterior was a storm of intentions. She offered him a meal and a warm place to rest, unaware that this simple act of kindness was the first step in a plan that would challenge the very foundations of the Apache family. That night, as Jaron settled into the modest room, he stared out the window at the silver glow of the moon on the plains. He thought of his family, proud and unyielding, and of Clara, a woman who had nothing yet possessed everything that mattered. His heart tightened with anticipation. The lesson he intended to teach his family was not a harsh punishment, but a revelation, one that would unfold slowly, painfully, and beautifully. Tomorrow his true plan would begin. Tomorrow the ordinary would confront the extraordinary, and pride would be tested in ways no one could predict. And Clara, unknowingly, would become the center of a story that could change lives, hearts, and the rigid expectations of an entire family. For Jaron Apache, the past had shaped him. But the future, this unexpected future, was about to rewrite everything. The following morning, the town of Red Willow was bathed in the crisp light of early dawn. Jaron Apache had spent the night pacing the dusty floor of Clara Duval's modest boarding house, considering every word, every gesture he would make. His plan was daring, audacious, and more dangerous than any duel he had witnessed in the East. He intended to marry Clara, not for love, not for convenience, but to send a lesson to his family so profound they would never forget it. Clara was already awake, her hands submerged in the warm, soapy water of the kitchen basin. She hummed softly, a tune her mother had taught her as a child, unaware of the storm about to enter her life. When she looked up, Jaron stood in the doorway, the morning light catching on the beads and feathers braided in his long black hair. Even shirtless, his muscular frame radiated authority and an unspoken intensity that made Clara pause mid-motion. "I have a request," Jaron said, his voice steady, yet carrying an unusual weight. "It is unconventional, perhaps even shocking, but I hope you will hear me." Clara wiped her hands on a rag and leaned against the counter, studying him with cautious curiosity. "Go on," she said softly. "I wish to marry you," he said simply. The words seemed to hang in the air, suspended in disbelief. Clara's eyes widened. "Marry me? But why? I am just a maid. I have nothing of value, no land, no wealth. Nothing." "That is precisely why," Jaron replied, his amber eyes locked on hers. "I am Apache, heir to a family that values power, status, and wealth above all else. They have long looked down on people like you, on people like me. And yet, I see in you a strength, a dignity, and a heart that my family cannot measure or understand. By marrying you, I will show them that their arrogance blinds them to true worth." Clara's mind spun. The proposition was preposterous, but there was something in Jaron's gaze, in the unwavering confidence in his stance, that made her heart pound. She had spent her life invisible to the privileged, and yet here was a man powerful, mysterious, and dangerous, offering her a position of honor, even if unconventional. "You're serious?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You want to marry me to prove something to your family?" "Yes," Jaron said. He took a careful step forward. "And I will not falter. They will come to respect you, even if they do so grudgingly. And if they do not, well, then they will see the cost of pride and arrogance in ways they cannot ignore." Clara exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. She had faced hardship all her life, poverty, loneliness, disregard, but this was something entirely new. And yet, despite the strangeness of it, she felt an unexpected stir of pride, courage, and even hope. "If I agree, what then?" she asked. "Then we marry," Jaron said, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You will stay here in Red Willow for now. My family will hear of it soon enough, and when they do, they will understand that no one's worth can be measured by money, lineage, or titles." Clara considered the offer. She could see the strategy in his plan, the intelligence, the audacity. But beneath it all, there was a sense of protection, a promise that she would not be a pawn, but a partner in this daring lesson. Finally, she nodded. "I will do it. But know this, if you intend to use me as a symbol, I will not stand quietly. I will be more than your lesson. I will be your equal, and they will have to face that too." Jaron's smile widened, the first genuine warmth in days softening the sternness of his features. "I would expect nothing less," he said, bowing slightly. The news traveled fast. Within hours, whispers of the unusual engagement swept through the town and eventually reached the Apache family compound. The elders were incredulous. Jaron Apache, heir to the revered line, marrying a maid? Some laughed, others shook their heads in disgust. Pride flared, tempers ignited, and expectations began to clash with reality. That night, as Clara prepared for the coming days, Jaron sat by the window, staring at the moonlit plains. He thought of the storm this marriage would bring, not just to his family, but to the rigid world that had long underestimated people like Clara. And yet, in the stillness of the night, a small flicker of something unexpected stirred within him, a respect, perhaps even admiration, for the woman who had just agreed to become the heart of his daring plan. Tomorrow the family would hear the news, and when they did, everything they thought they knew about honor, worth, and love would be challenged in ways they could never have imagined. News traveled faster than fire through dry grass, and by mid-morning, the Apache family compound was buzzing with incredulity and outrage. Jaron Apache's announcement had reached the ears of his father, Kalen, a man whose pride was as vast as the plains themselves, and whose temper could ignite like lightning across a summer sky. His mother, Nayeli, whispered sharp warnings, while his younger brothers and cousins eyed one another, uncertain whether to laugh or curse. "You can't be serious," Kalen growled, his voice echoing off the high wooden beams of the family lodge. He stood tall, chest broad and imposing, a man whose every gesture demanded obedience. "A maid? Jaron, you would dishonor our family for what? A lesson?" Jaron sat calmly across from him, his muscular frame relaxed but his eyes blazing with determination. The sun through the wide-open windows caught the braided strands of his black hair, the beads glinting like tiny stars. "Father," he said evenly, "it is exactly because she is a maid, exactly because she is not of our status, that I marry her. Pride has blinded this family for too long. You see worth only in wealth and bloodlines, not in heart or courage." Nayeli, always the more measured of the elders, shook her head. "Jaron, your words are bold, but boldness is not wisdom. You risk your inheritance, the respect of our allies, the very reputation of the Apache name." Jaron leaned forward, his amber eyes locking on his father's. "Respect is earned, not assumed. And if this marriage teaches our family anything, it will be that power without understanding, pride without compassion, is meaningless." Kellen's face darkened, veins standing out on his forehead. "You will bring shame to this family," he thundered. "How can you expect us to accept?" "Enough," Jaron interrupted. His voice was calm but carried a weight that made even the fiercest of his family pause. "You will accept it not because you wish to, but because you have no choice. And perhaps in time you will understand a lesson." The lodge fell silent, tension hanging like a storm cloud ready to burst. His brothers exchanged uneasy glances. They had grown accustomed to Jaron's intelligence and skill in trade and strategy, but this was something entirely unexpected. They could not fathom why he would risk everything, marry a woman of humble means, when there were alliances to secure, wealth to protect, and their family's honor to maintain. Meanwhile, in the town of Red Willow, Clara heard the approaching voices and felt a ripple of apprehension. The Apache family had arrived, their horses kicking up clouds of dust as they rode into the town square, a silent display of authority and dominance. Among them were Kalen and Nayeli, flanked by young men whose scowls could curdle milk. They dismounted, their boots clicking against the wooden planks, eyes fixed on Clara's modest boarding house. Jaron approached her, his hand brushing gently against hers, grounding her. "Stay calm," he whispered. "This is exactly what I intended. They will come to see what you already know. Strength and worth are not measured by station or status." Kalen stepped forward, his gaze piercing. "Clara Duval," he said, voice cold and commanding, "do you understand what you have done by marrying into this family? You have brought disrespect, Dishonor. Clara straightened, her eyes meeting his without flinching. I married your son not to disrespect you, she said firmly, but because he saw value in me when you did not. And if you wish to see dishonor, perhaps it is not in my hands, but in your refusal to see what is right before you. A murmur ran through the gathered family members. Whispers of disbelief, anger, and even admiration danced across their faces. They had expected a meek, fearful woman, someone who would bow and accept humiliation. Instead, Clara stood with unwavering poise, eyes steady, courage unshaken. Jaron placed a hand on her shoulder, a subtle signal of solidarity. This is the lesson, he said, his voice calm, almost serene. Your pride will meet its match in reality. And from this, we will see what truly matters. Kellen's jaw tightened, the muscles in his face straining. He realized in that tense, electric moment that this was not a rebellion of youth or a fleeting whim. This was a carefully calculated statement, one that would force the family to reconsider the rigid codes that had ruled them for generations. The day stretched long, the plains outside silent witnesses to the unfolding confrontation. And deep within the hearts of both Jaron and Clara, a quiet understanding took root. Together, they would weather the storm not as pawn and strategist, but as partners in a lesson that would shake the foundations of the Apache family forever. The streets of Red Willow were never quiet, but now whispers carried like wildfire. Jaron Apache and Clara Duval's marriage had become the talk of every saloon, trading post, and stable. Townsfolk stared as the formidable, shirtless warrior with long black hair and tribal jewelry rode alongside Clara, her head held high despite the curious and sometimes judgmental gazes. Some were awed, some sneered, but none could ignore the unshakable presence of the pair. Clara had grown accustomed to glances, some admiring, some questioning, but the constant chatter gnawed at her peace. She had never sought attention, nor wished to stand out. Yet here she was, the center of a daring lesson orchestrated by a man whose mind was as sharp as his strength was legendary. One morning, as she swept the porch of the boarding house, a group of women approached, their faces a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled scorn. So, you're the maid he married? One hissed, her voice loud enough for the other onlookers to hear. Do you think you can really hold your own in that family? Or are you just a pawn in his scheme? Clara paused, broom in hand, and met her gaze steadily. I am not a pawn. I am a person, she said calmly. And if standing with him is part of a lesson, I will see it through with respect, courage, and dignity. The women exchanged startled glances, clearly expecting her to cower or offer excuses. Instead, Clara's voice carried a quiet authority, the kind that commanded acknowledgement even from skeptics. Meanwhile, Jaron observed from his horse nearby, the morning sun glinting off the beads and feathers braided into his long black hair. His muscular frame was taut, each movement precise and controlled, radiating confidence. When he caught Clara's eye, he gave a subtle nod and unspoken promise of solidarity and protection. The message was clear. She was not alone, and together they would face whatever challenges arose. At the Apache family compound, Kellen's fury had not subsided. Day after day, he questioned his advisors, his sons, and even his wife. This union will bring dishonor, he insisted, pacing the floor like a caged beast. We must intervene. We cannot allow this woman, a mere maid, to teach us humility. You cannot control everything, Kellen, Nayeli cautioned. Perhaps it is time to accept that Jaron sees something you cannot. Pride blinds the heart, but lessons can open it. Kalen gritted his teeth, his mind torn between anger and an unfamiliar pang of unease. Could it be possible that Jaron's marriage was more than rebellion, that it might indeed reveal truths the family had long refused to see? Back in Red Willow, the situation escalated when a group of young men from nearby settlements rode into town. Fueled by rumors of the Apache warrior and his maid, they challenged Jaron at the town square, mocking Clara and questioning his motives. Dust swirled around the tense scene, sunlight cutting across the square in sharp golden streaks. Jaron dismounted with a fluid motion, amber eyes flashing, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to strike. Clara stepped forward, her presence steady, her voice carrying across the murmuring crowd. "This man is not here for your judgment, and neither am I," she said firmly. "We stand together, not to prove your assumptions, but to demonstrate courage, respect, and understanding." The crowd hesitated. Jaron's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his knife, but it was Clara's words that struck harder than any blade. Even the most skeptical observer felt the weight of her conviction, the undeniable strength of a woman who had been underestimated her whole life. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the plains, Jaron and Clara sat together on the boarding house porch. The wind carried the faint scent of sage and dust, and the distant mountains glowed violet in the fading light. "You handled them well today," Jaron said softly, his hand brushing against hers. "You have a strength that my family and this town are only beginning to see." Clara smiled faintly, the weight of the day pressing gently on her shoulders. "I am learning," she admitted, "not just about them, but about myself. Perhaps this lesson is as much for me as it is for your family." Jaron's gaze softened, the amber fire in his eyes tempered by genuine admiration. "Then we will continue, side by side. Let the whispers rise. Let the world test us. In time, they will see that the measure of a person is not in birthright, wealth, or position, but in courage, heart, and character." As night settled over Red Willow, the pair sat in quiet defiance, ready to face the growing storm. The lesson had begun, and no rumor, challenge, or insult could derail the path they had chosen together, unyielding and unbreakable. The Apache family's anger had festered like a wound, and by the 5th day after the announcement, Kalen could no longer tolerate what he saw as humiliation. His pride demanded action. Advisors whispered of schemes, of subtle ways to disrupt the marriage, to test Clara's resolve and Jaron's patience. It was not enough that the town gossiped, they intended to make the lesson painful, almost unbearable. Kalen summoned his younger sons and a few loyal men. "We cannot allow this union to continue without consequence," he said, voice low but laced with authority. "We will remind Jaron of his place. We will remind this Maid of hers. They must learn that no act of defiance goes unchallenged in our family." Meanwhile, in Red Willow, Clara and Jaron continued their daily routines with quiet resolve. Clara tended to the boarding house chores, while Jaron oversaw repairs to the stable and corral. Yet the tension in town had grown unbearable. Merchants whispered behind closed doors, and strangers would pause their daily errands to sneak glances at the pair. Even children stopped to stare, their innocent eyes wide with curiosity and awe. One afternoon, a stranger approached, cloaked in dust and carrying a heavy sack. He introduced himself as a merchant, but his gaze lingered too long on Clara, a sly smirk curling his lips. "Your husband is strong," he said, voice smooth and slightly mocking. "But strength alone cannot shield you from the world, miss." Clara's fingers tightened around the broom she held, but Jaron stepped forward, amber eyes sharp, muscles tense and ready. His long black hair caught the sunlight, feathers and beads glinting, emphasizing his presence as both protector and warrior. "She is not yours to threaten," he said firmly, the depth of his voice resonating across the dusty street. "Leave before you discover the meaning of courage and consequence." The man hesitated, clearly unnerved by the intensity in Jaron's gaze, and eventually retreated with a bow of reluctant respect. Clara exhaled, her heart pounding. "They will not stop, will they?" she asked quietly. Jaron shook his head. "No, but neither will we. Every act against us only proves the lesson further. My family in this town will see that fear and prejudice are powerless against integrity and strength." That evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Jaron received word that Kaelin had sent envoys into Red Willow under the guise of diplomacy. They came with gifts, polite words, and veiled threats attempts to bribe Clara, to sow doubt in her mind about her place in the Apache household. Clara examined the gifts carefully: silk ribbons, a silver comb, a small pouch of coins. "They hope I will be tempted," she said softly, her amber eyes reflecting determination. "They hope I will falter." Jaron placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Do you think for a moment that I would allow them to test you?" His voice was calm, yet unyielding. "They underestimate both of us. This marriage is a lesson, yes, but it is also a shield. And together we are unbreakable." As night fell over Red Willow, the couple walked to the edge of the plains. The wind carried the faint scent of sage and dust, and the stars glittered in a vast open sky. Clara's hand rested in Jaron's, their fingers intertwined in silent solidarity. "Do you ever wonder if your family will ever understand?" she asked. "Perhaps not in the way I hope," Jaron admitted. "But understanding is not the immediate goal. The goal is to awaken something they have long ignored, the truth that honor is not in arrogance. And that strength lies in respect and heart, not in wealth or lineage." Clara smiled faintly, her resolve hardening. "Then let them try. Let them bring all their schemes. I will not be moved, and neither will you. Together we are more than a lesson. They will see that soon enough." And as they stood side by side under the endless canopy of stars, the winds whispered across the plains, carrying a message as old as the earth itself: pride, unchecked, will always meet its match. And in the quiet defiance of a maid and a warrior, the foundations of power, arrogance, and expectation began to tremble. The storm was coming, but Jaron and Clara were ready. Side by side, they would face it all, teaching a lesson that no force could erase. The following morning, Red Willow seemed almost serene, the golden sun spilling across the plains and lighting up the wooden facades of the town. But the calm was deceiving. Inside Clara's modest boarding house, tension hung thick as dust in the air. Jaron Apache moved like a coiled predator, muscles taut beneath his shirtless frame, long black hair braided with feathers and beads, his amber eyes scanning every window, every street corner. Clara watched him quietly, admiration mixing with worry. She had faced the whispers, the bribes, the veiled threats, but now the real test was coming. Kaelin and a group of senior family members were riding into Red Willow, their expressions sharp, their intentions unmistakable. They intended to confront Clara directly, to question her worth and her influence over Jaron, and perhaps, they hoped, to break her resolve. As the riders dismounted, dust swirling around their boots, Clara felt the pull of fear, but also the growing fire of determination within her. She stepped onto the porch, her stance straight, hands clasped loosely before her. Jaron followed, standing behind her like a living shield, his presence radiating strength, defiance, and unwavering protection. Kaelin approached first, his face stern, every line a testament to decades of pride and command. "Clara Duval," he said, voice echoing across the small courtyard, "do you truly believe you belong in this family? That you, a maid, can teach us lessons?" Clara lifted her chin, amber eyes steady. "I belong because Jaron saw my worth, something this family has ignored for too long. I am not here to teach or punish, but to stand as I am. If that is a lesson, it is one of respect, courage, and truth." Kellen's jaw tightened, and he motioned for one of his sons to speak. But before the boy could utter a word, Jaron stepped forward, muscles coiled, his gaze unwavering. "This family will see that worth is not in birthright or riches," he said calmly. "It is in character, heart, and the strength to stand for what is right." Clara embodies that strength. A hush fell over the assembled group. Even Kellen's closest advisors shifted uneasily, unprepared for the force of the truth that radiated from this unlikely pairing. Clara, usually quiet and reserved, now stood fully in her power, her confidence unshaken. "Strength," Jaron continued, "is not demonstrated through fear or domination. It is shown in courage, kindness, and the willingness to face adversity without bowing to prejudice." Kellen's face reddened. His pride bruised, but he could not deny the undeniable bond between Jaron and Clara. They had faced whispers, threats, and schemes, and yet neither wavered. The maid he had dismissed so readily had proven herself not just worthy of respect, but vital to the balance of strength and honor within the family. For the first time, Nayeli, his mother, stepped forward, her gaze softening as she studied Clara. "Perhaps we have been blind," she said quietly. "Perhaps the lesson is not in punishment, but in humility, in recognizing the courage that comes in forms we least expect." Kalen remained silent, the words cutting deeper than any argument could. His son had orchestrated not a defiance, but a revelation, a display of wisdom and heart that none could ignore. The anger that had once flared so hotly now met a quiet understanding, grudging yet undeniable. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the tension lift slightly. She knew the battle was not over, but this moment, this acknowledgement of her strength, was a victory in itself. Jaron's hand found hers, the warmth grounding her, reinforcing the truth they had lived each day. Together they could withstand any storm. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the Apache family finally began to see what Jaron had known all along: worth. Courage and honor were not dictated by status, lineage, or wealth, but by the heart and the strength to stand unyielding. That evening, as the stars began to twinkle across the wide-open plains, Jaron and Clara sat together outside the boarding house. The wind carried the faint scent of sage, and the distant mountains glowed violet in the twilight. "We did it," Clara whispered, leaning against him. "They are beginning to understand." "Not fully," Jaron replied, amber eyes thoughtful. "But they are beginning. And that is enough for now. Every lesson takes time, and every heart needs space to awaken." Together, they watched the night settle over Red Willow, the plains silent witnesses to their courage. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the Apache family would continue to learn lesson by lesson, truth by truth, what it truly meant to measure worth and strength. The following morning, the plains outside Red Willow were bathed in pale gold, the wind carrying whispers of sage and dust across the town. Jaron Apache and Clara Duval stood together at the edge of the small wooden bridge that spanned a shallow creek. Their fingers intertwined, the quiet strength between them almost tangible. For weeks, they had faced scrutiny, whispers, bribes, and veiled threats. Yet here they were, unwavering, having proven not only their own courage but the truth of Jaron's daring lesson. Inside the Apache family compound, Kalen paced, the leather of his boots creaking against the wooden floor. The lesson had taken root in ways he had never anticipated. For the first time, he truly observed Clara not as a maid, not as an outsider, but as a woman of undeniable strength, intelligence, and heart. She had faced town gossip, threats, and even his family's intimidation, and she had never faltered. Nayeli, standing nearby, placed a hand lightly on his arm. "Kalen," she said quietly, "perhaps the lesson is complete. Perhaps pride is no longer the measure of worth, but understanding and respect." Kellen's jaw tightened, and he exhaled slowly, the tension in his broad shoulders softening. He could no longer deny it. The woman his son had married was extraordinary, and through her courage, Jaron had shown the family a truth they had long ignored. Meanwhile, in Red Willow, Jaron and Clara returned to the small town square where curious townsfolk gathered once again. This time, their expressions were different, a mix of admiration, awe, and acceptance. The partnership between the Apache warrior and the Maid had become undeniable, a living testament to courage, unity, and the strength found in unexpected places. Clara turned to Jaron, her amber eyes reflecting both relief and quiet triumph. "Do you think they finally understand?" she asked. "Some of them," Jaron replied, his hand brushing a loose strand of her braided hair behind her ear. "Understanding takes time, but they cannot deny what they have seen. Courage, integrity, and heart are qualities that cannot be ignored." Kalen arrived in town the next day, accompanied by Nayeli and a few close advisors. His expression was solemn, but there was a newfound respect in his amber eyes as he approached the pair. "Jaron," he said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of acknowledgement, "I see now that the strength of a person is not measured by wealth or status. You have taught me, and our family, a lesson I will not soon forget." Clara stepped forward, bowing her head slightly, her voice gentle but firm. "I did not seek to teach a lesson, sir. I sought only to live with courage and dignity. If that has opened your eyes, then I am grateful. Respect and understanding are the true measures of worth." Kellen's gaze softened, and he nodded slowly. "You have my respect," he said. "And my family's as well." Jaron's eyes gleamed, amber light reflecting the dawn, and he gave a small smile. "Then the lesson is complete." Over the next days, the town of Red Willow watched as the Apache family slowly embraced Clara, her strength undeniable and her wisdom quietly guiding the family toward humility and understanding. The boarding house became a symbol of unity, courage, and integrity. People who had once whispered and judged now sought advice and guidance from the woman who had faced the impossible and stood unshaken. As the sun set over the endless plains, Jaron and Clara rode side by side across the golden fields, the wind tugging at Jaron's long black hair and feathers, the beads in his braids glinting like tiny stars. Clara's hand rested in his, fingers intertwined, and for the first time in weeks, the world felt calm, balanced, and right. They had faced whispers, arrogance, and prejudice, and emerged victorious. Not through domination, nor wealth, nor lineage, but through courage, heart, and an unbreakable partnership. The Apache family had learned humility. The town had learned respect. And most importantly, Jaron and Clara had learned the enduring strength of standing together against all odds. The plains stretched endlessly before them, a reminder that life's challenges were vast, but together, no obstacle was insurmountable. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fire and violet, and the two figures rode on, symbols of courage, love, and a lesson well taught. In the quiet of the evening, as stars began to glimmer across the velvet sky, the story of the Apache warrior and the Maid became legend, a tale of audacity, honor, and the enduring power of heart over pride.